Hello, and I'm so glad to be here today to talk to you all about how do you focus on making your customer the center of all the conversations. And to help me in that today, and I'm going to introduce them to have them come on up here and join me, is first Bob Kelly, the chairman of the Sales Management Association. The Sales Management Association works with organizations across 50 different countries with networking events and research and conferences, and we're glad to have Bob on the panel with us today. Next is Jeff Benish from Diebold Nixdorf. Jeff is the Vice President of the Center of Excellence for worldwide for Diebold, and he has been leading the charge with enabling over 1,000 sellers, and most recently facilitating the merger that happened between Diebold and Nixdorf and enabling those 1,000 sellers as they come together. And then lastly, we have Glenn Davis. Glenn is the Senior Vice President of Growth Strategy for Optum Health. And Glenn has had a very distinguished career in leading very significant organizations in growth strategies and leadership initiatives around how do you grow organizations. So we're going to be having a very good conversation. But first, I'd like to kind of set the stage with just a little bit about what we've done with Altify around some really good research. So part of our organization at Altify is what we call Altify Knowledge. And this brings together a lot of what we've done in sales methodologies over the years, but the real focus, what we did on a study was, what are buyers saying and what are sellers saying about the state of the business that we're in today? So we did a study this past April. It had about 1,200 participants from 66 countries, and it was about 3-to-1 buyers and sellers. And the buyers are responsible for purchasing about $5.8 billion worth of solutions. So it's pretty substantial. And what we found out was buyers and sellers, while we agree around the macro, there's probably a different viewpoint of what's actually going on in the market today. And one of the things we found that's interesting is over 60% of the meetings that are happening right now, from a buyer's perspective, do not progress to a next meeting. It's a pretty staggering statistic, because what that means, it's about $38,000 per seller in the US of wasted meeting cost, and you roll that all up and it's about a $590 billion problem. So you ask yourself, why does that happen? And it all comes down to value. Significant amounts of buyers aren't seeing the value happen for them during the selling process, during that sales call. And then if you think about why they're not seeing value, it's because they're not seeing value coming from the salesperson augmenting their knowledge. Because as we all know, sales buyers can find out a significant amount about what you're trying to sell them before you ever speak with them. What they're hungry for is you bringing additional insight and bringing that additional augmenting of what they know of your solutions as they go forward. Whereas sellers think they're doing that already. And so the question that we're going to really talk about today is, how do we help with that? Because we've heard a lot of buzz about it, is how relevant is a seller going to be in the future? Well, I would argue that as sellers, we drive a lot of that relevance right now. And if we can truly shift the focus on to driving that value for the customer and bringing those insights to the customer, we have a significant outcome in that. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is the impact on a buying organization of a bad buying decision is typically significantly greater than the impact on the seller than a lost sale. So if we figure out how we can show up to make a difference for our customers as opposed to trying to make a sale to our customers, that's going to be the real crux of what we're trying to do. So what we'd like to do in the conversation today is really kind of focus on that. And Glenn, kind of to start off, I'd like to start with you. If you think about that backdrop and think about the disconnect between what buyers are seeing, what sellers are saying, what have you been doing in the Optum Growth Office to try to help enable sales leaders and sales makers to really focus on that value proposition?
Yep, so I think two very important things that help drive that. The first is to create a context for our sales makers, those folks that face the field, to think deeply about the client problem. We do that via the Insight Map, which is kind of part of the Altify tool set. And really, we all talk about kind of being client-focused and customer-focused, and we never develop frameworks to give salespeople an opportunity to really think deeply about what the customer is trying to accomplish, and so we use that tool set very, very deeply. The second thing that we're doing is kind of really trying to streamline what salespeople do, whether we want to talk about that in terms of process or just their daily activities. I think as we come to conferences like this, it's very easy to get caught up in the art of the possible. There's nothing wrong with that, but are we really clouding the environment that our sales makers work in? So we've been talking an awful lot about this concept of Zen selling. In other words, getting things out of the way of sales makers so they can focus on kind of their key and core activities, such as prospecting, and really doing the things that they should be doing to drive value to the customer so that when we come time to close, we're having a value for value exchange.
I know in your business, there's a lot of things that you all are selling. What are some of the examples of what you've been doing to eliminate from a sales maker's experience to help them with that more Zen selling, stealing your term, approach?
Yep. So the biggest thing is, sales is an operation just like anything else, and in all of our operational endeavors, we do labor arbitrage. I mean, we look and find the lowest cost resource that can do an activity to free up the people that are doing the high value activities to do their job. And specifically in our strategic space, we're taking great pain to guard our sales makers from any activity that is not vital to what they're doing, and eliminating, frankly, by moving off to different resources, because many of the things we do are needed. They just don't need to be done by the sales maker. And that's starting to prove very, very useful. Excellent.
Jeff, I know that you all at Diebold are very focused on, I would call them 6 very key specific strategies for you guys play in the banking space, so there's 6 key. How do you, or how have you gone about enabling your 1,000 sellers to be able to really connect with those banking customers around those 6 strategies?
Yeah, so as a company, as we've come together as Diebold Nixdorf, we've had this golden opportunity to rebrand and really talking about how we bring the physical and digital together. And what this really boils down to when we think about our customers is a range of strategies that are really in the customer's words. The customers don't talk about ATMs or efficiency all the time. But what they do talk about is they want to talk about how they transform their branches. They want to talk about cash cycle management. They do want to talk about operational efficiency, security, digital innovation, and payments. And so what we've done is we've really tried to force all of our language and all the way that our sellers think into the ways that the customers think. And then we really try to kind of sell against that. Now, some of these, like retail transformation, are much broader than what we as Diebold Nixdorf can offer by ourselves. Some of them are really specific to what we offer. So true cash cycle management is something which is so specific to us that we've got the end-to-end solution. But regardless, what this does is it actually really aligns us with what the priorities of the customer are. Because what I always like to tell our sellers is the role of the seller and the way that you bring value to the organization is by helping the buyer do their job. And I think that reflects very well with the research that Matt showed, which is really the value is when you help the buyer do their job.
And how have because I know it was a bit of a shift for you all starting a couple years ago when you really started enabling these. How have the sellers embraced it, and how have you enabled them to be able to take that forward?
Yeah, so I think to be frank, we got out a little ahead of ourselves in terms of trying to train before we had all the marketing messaging ready. But then when I think we realized that, and we kind of did a little bit of a restart to really align the marketing with it. But the other thing that I think we've done is we've had to try to simplify the approach so that it really is something where everyone will tell the story in their own way. So you need to break it down to the points that someone can actually make their own story around. And I think there's actually a challenge when you over-script these messages. So it's really, again, thinking about the frameworks that the customers use and really trying to train the sellers on how to think against those same kinds of frameworks.
Great. Now, Bob, obviously I'm biased because we work with these organizations, but both Optum and Diebold Nixdorf are kind of out there getting their folks ready to do it. What else are you seeing across the marketplace on how organizations are trying to enable sellers to put the customer first and really build that value?
Well, we really focus on the management decisions that are upstream of selling activity, and these are really important things. Chief among them is maybe the simplest thing, which is providing clarity to salespeople around their responsibilities and their role. So, for example, helping a sales organization deploy against the very best opportunities. Figuring out how to structure that sales force, which segments they should cover, and even equally importantly, which they should not spend time on. So helping salespeople make these decisions and handicap opportunities and deploying accordingly with sales organizations, that's a really important management decision that really, everyone wants to be more customer focused, but no one can afford to be more focused on all customers. This is really a challenge related to resource allocation, so you need to pick your spots and place your bets. Imagining the sales organization as a casino, there are certain games of chance that are more where the odds are more in your favor. And so this is a key thing that managers do for sales organizations. They provide that direction. Beyond that, there's lots of things that companies and management can do to support sales organizations. Chief among these is training, really. I mean, we know from our own research of our membership that the hardest thing, actually it's the second hardest thing, it's the second most important thing in training salespeople is helping them understand how to deliver value according to the organization's value proposition and how it competes. So this is a huge training challenge, but getting that right, I think, is essential to supporting sellers in this area.
Excellent. Now, being is that we're here at Dreamforce and we're really kind of talking about how do you really leverage the platforms that we have in place for our sales team. This is kind of a question to both Glenn and Jeff. What kind of technology decisions have you guys made in your organizations to help enable your salespeople? And how do you leverage technology to help them be better at focusing on those customers that they should be focusing on? Why not pass on down? We'll get another.
Yeah. So I think actually when Glenn talked about Zen selling before, it's actually really similar to what we're trying to do, which is I think trying to go towards this aim of radical simplification. I think we developed, for several years, we really over-instrumented the salespeople to the point where they couldn't carry around all the probes that we had attached to them. We're actually now, as a part of our merger integration, revamping our sales process, and it'll actually make the technology usage radically different. We're going from a sales process, which you probably would describe with imagine your 6 stages with boxes. We probably had 60 different boxes on an Excel spreadsheet. We're simplifying our sales process down to something you can probably describe in less than 60 words in terms of all 6 stages. And I think then when you start to then roll this out to technology, suddenly what we're trying to do is we're trying to use technology rather than an endless measurement tool as really a way to just facilitate the conversation and take it back to really at the end of the day, how does the technology help a seller have a conversation with their customer and with their sales manager to actually kind of identify the customer need and make the sale.
So we talked kind of, and we prepare for these meetings, obviously. We talked about kind of the investment of time that you folks make before you push technology out to people. And I thought the way you approach it is very, very smart, very meaningful. Maybe the group would be interested in hearing about the time that you take to kind of make sure that it's really going to benefit the seller.
Well, I think we all know. So for us, it takes an immense amount of effort to roll something out across all the countries that we operate in. Basically, if a country has a bank, we have a salesperson there. And so I think what we've tried to do then is really focus on technology partners where they have process IP. So it's a lot, takes a lot of work to roll out something to 1,000 sellers spread around the world. So we try to place those bets very specifically. And then when we do it, we've realized that as called a medium-sized company, we're really more focused on the usage of the tools rather than the tools itself. So that's something where, frankly, we love the Force.com platform. When things are on Force.com, it actually makes our job as from our IT team much easier. They don't really have to worry about security or anything else. Parker would be happy to say that I actually believe what he says. Force.com works. But I think so from a technology perspective, it comes down to really what's going to be used and adopted wherever we can. Second, making a few strategic bets where we can leverage process IP from the partners. And third, focusing on places where we really can get the technology ready to use off the shelf rather than having to build ourselves.
Yeah, and I just think that's so important because there is the age of connectivity. We have so many choices of things that we can block salespeople's activities with that really don't drive any value. And we've got, in our environment, we've got 600 plus SKUs or $200 billion enterprise. We have to kind of look at this at really a very granular level and make sure that just because this group of sales folks delivering this value to a customer needs this solution doesn't mean everybody needs it. And so how do we minimize the chaos in the environment so that, our field-facing force, and, we've all kind of sold, you really want to get stuff out of their way so they can engage and interact with their clients. And I think that's the smartest thing we can all do is really ask ourselves this simple question. Is it technology advancing the opportunity for you to have value conversations with your clients? And if it's not, then number one, you maybe don't need it, or number two, you may need it and the salesperson shouldn't be doing it.
Glenn, you've talked about, and you and I have had a chance to talk about this quite a bit, and I'll call it your 3-word mantra. I think you know what I'm talking about. Can you talk about the importance of kind of how you set your salespeople up to be able to get there? Because it's not just all about the tool set. There's a couple steps before that. Can you kind of figure out how you ended up to be there?
Yeah, sure. So as we engage with our sales force, 1,400 people or so, we think about a very simple kind of way of thinking about things: mindset, skill sets, and tool sets. And the mindset piece is really giving them a framework to be customer focused. And that's something that we really imbue into all of our salespeople, and we stay very, very focused on it. Every deal review starts with a review of the insight map so that we can understand the client value proposition and the value we're trying to drive to the customer. The skill set piece comes in because if you look at kind of all the time studies done on salespeople, they spend about 22 or 23% of their time actually selling. Okay, 22 or 23% of their time actually selling, because we have them doing all this other nonsense. And so how can we eliminate the other nonsense? But whatever time they're going to have with customers, we want them incredibly focused on the key fundamentals of selling. There's never been a championship team delivered of any kind anywhere that wasn't super good at the fundamentals. So again, we're big believers in kind of the Alt-Fi methodology, and so we drive that home with our salespeople, and it is really enterprise-wide. Everyone knows the key questions and the processes, and so mindset, skill sets, and then finally the tool sets. How do we wrap it all together in the technology so that it truly enables in the salesperson's workflow meaningful discussions and conversations that can happen both with the client, and then as we're trying to bring that opportunity back into house so that we can solve for, with our solution folks and our product folks and our implementation folks, the client's challenges, we can have meaningful conversations. So it's really mindset, skill sets, and tool sets. And it's a framework that we developed about a year ago, and it's really caught on nicely with our sales makers.
Excellent, excellent. Jeff, I know you've really dug into these 6 key strategies. Could you share with us, and the names can be changed to protect the innocent, but where you've really seen it make a difference for a customer when you guys have come to them and with those customer-centric strategies?
Yeah, so I think, to be fair, a lot of times the best innovations are the ones that we actually do in partnership with our customers. So, a recent example of a place where we do, payments innovation type work is like with Citibank when we developed the Retina scanner. This was an idea that Citibank had. We have been looking at biometrics, and we basically partnered with them to roll that out. There's also deeper ones. Last year we entered an agreement with Walmart where we're working together with them on something that's really a very customer-centric transformation for them, which is Walmart wants to be able to provide a full set of financial services, including things like balance payments, bill pay, remittances, and be able to do that through kind of their own branded experience. And so we actually partnered with them to develop a total solution, which was everything from software to actually run the platform on, the hardware that takes the money and distributes the cash, and then also the services to actually manage this for them on a managed services basis. At the end of the day, this was really about a vision that we were able to show to Walmart of how they could actually create an end-to-end customer experience that also transformed what they were able to do with their stores and leverage their points of presence. And now with Walmart, of course, this is it's a multi-thousand location rollout. We're really providing those end-to-end services and making it really a turnkey way for them to help them solve their own customers' problems.
Excellent, excellent. Bob, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, and this is kind of the piggyback off of a comment that Jeff made about the simplification of his sales process. And you were talking about some of the work that you all do with organizations to help them understand their sales process. You want to give some of that background research and how important it is to focus on getting that selling process correct?
Well, not to be negative, but we do sometimes, we've learned not to underestimate what companies, even large ones, don't always do that you might assume they do. But so one of those things is studying how customers buy, because managing the sales effort as a process is important for most companies, and the way to do that is to match the process to how customers buy. So we find generally that our companies in our research, about 85%, a very large number, have a sales process that is used to sort of govern decisions about where to invest in content and support and that sort of thing. But far fewer have sales processes that are more specific than that generic level. So, for example, that are, I would point to processes specific to a market or to a segment of buyers or to even a use case or a user persona. And when you begin to really build those things out and support them with content and with training, then that's where I think high-performing companies differentiate themselves from other firms. Generally, I think companies they tend to underinvest in the value of their own customer base and overstate the value of new customers. Despite the perspective of our previous speaker, I would say that the most
you
actionable.
can prospect into your current customers too.
Yeah. I would say
We call that account planning in these parts.
Sure, right.
That's what we call it.
Generally, we see a lot of customers over-invested in new customer acquisition when the best source of profitable growth is in their own customer base. And so, I see companies should direct generally more investment in that area. So those are a few thoughts.
One of the things you were talking about earlier, and Glenn, I'm going to put you on the spot because you shared with me, but you were talking about making sure you're calling on the right customers and really focusing there. Glenn, as you guys have rolled out Edge and you've been going through and understanding, have you been able to enable your sales folks to be able to select the right deals and get the teams aligned in the right way?
Yeah, we started on this kind of journey to deploy our methodology 18-ish, 24-ish months ago. And so we've fully deployed, and as you all would do, we've got key metrics we're looking at. And one of the key metrics that has surprised us, frankly, is time to deal qualification. So in our process, when you move from stage 1 to stage 2, it moves from an unqualified deal to a qualified deal for the purposes of scorekeeping and investment and so on and so forth. So it used to be that across kind of our 600 plus SKUs, it would take 50, 60, 70 days to move from stage 1 to stage 2. And with keen focus on the core skill sets of Edge, that is down to 7-ish, 8-ish days. And so what that tells us...
Wait, you went from 60 to 70 days to 7 to 8.
8-ish days.
Wow.
And what that tells us is we've spent a lot of time trying to train sales folks to say, can I make money on this deal? Can I close this deal? Is there really a deal there? Or should I move forward and get onto one that I really can close? And they've taken it very seriously. We've also actually, just to kind of share, in the first segment that we rolled out that's been in the field now for about 14, 15 months, 40% increase in deal size, 38% increase in close ratios.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really going phenomenally well. But it's been this focus on, again, those 3 key aspects: mindset, skill sets, and tool sets.
Outstanding. First off, I want to be the first to say thank you guys for sharing with these folks here about some of the work you're doing in your companies, because I know it's not easy. It's not easy work. It's preparing them and getting everything ready to go. Before we move on to saying goodbye to you all, we'd like to offer a couple key things. So directly after this session, our CEO will be straight across the hall signing books for his newest book, talking about our perspective on how do you leverage artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence to drive your sales performance, and how do you do that in the context of all of the things that are going on inside of AI today. Secondly, if you scan at the back of the room, we'll be happy to send along to you our perspective on how do you put the customer at the center. And Jeff touched on it, and that's how do you do good account planning, and how do you really make sure you're strategically aligned and focused. So that's a resource we're happy to provide as well. And then also, because they've been such an incredible host here for this whole thing, do check out Quotable. There's a lot of incredible information there every day. So again, thank you, gentlemen. Truly appreciate it, and thank you all for coming.